Hello.
Hello.
I would like to introduce myself. My name is Fayina Cohen. I'm a therapist and coach. And here is my esteemed friend and colleague, Melisa Desperak, hypnotherapist, martial artist, coach, and lover of all beings. Namaste, my love.
Namaste.
And today we're going to speak about a conscious being, poet. His name is Rainer Maria Rilke. And Melisa will introduce him and speak a little bit about his life. And we'll share some of his poetry, especially what has pierced us, and some of the great wisdom that he left behind for us that could be used even today.
Okay, so let's talk about Rilke. Rilke is one of my favorite poets. I used to always joke around and say he was my boyfriend, because when I used to read his poetry, it was like so piercing, so beautiful. I think that the sense you get when you read his poetry is that he suffered a lot, that he dealt with illness and a lot of loneliness, and something was forged in those moments of isolation that he had and the solitude that he had, that is just an amazing, beautiful being emerged from that, was forged from that difficulty that he had. So just to give you a little bit of background on him, he was born in Austria-Hungary in the 1800s, in the late 1800s. And he was a frail-looking guy. They sent him to military school, but he wasn't like this military type. And he ended up having issues with his health. And because of that, he left the military school. But I think it was nothing like who he was. In other words, it's like putting a gentle soul into throwing him into a type of life that wasn't really part of his essence. It gets interesting. At 22, he fell in love with Lou Andrea Salome. She was a Russian psychoanalyst and author, and 7 years his elder. And there's a little interesting anecdote about her, because she was his muse. She was his lover at first, and then she became a longtime friend and sort of like an advocate for his work, and in a way inspired a lot of his the passion that we could read in his poetry. She, interestingly, had affairs with Nietzsche, Freud, and a lot of well-known creative types of her time. And she was really far ahead of her time, because she married someone, and she married this person under the premise that we're not going to be intimate, we're just going to be partners in life. And then she had affairs with other people, which I think is very progressive for the late 1800s. Mm-hmm. So at some point, like a year after they broke up, he went to an artist colony in Germany and met his future wife. She was a sculptor, but their relationship didn't have a lot of passion. That's not where he got most of his passion for what we'll see when we start to read. And I think that it was Salome, but also the solitude and the difficulty he was dealing with in his health. I think it wasn't clear at first what was wrong with him, but at the end, I think they concluded that he had leukemia, and he died quite young. He died at the age of 51.
He was a mystic, and he spoke about his soul, and he spoke about, he kind of seemed to be the kind of mystics that I'm attracted to, that have had life experiences of passion and love. And then that gets translated into that same desire for the God's love. And in reading his poetry, I feel him. I feel the passion in his heart and his longing. And a lot of his longing is to know God, to merge with God, to merge with creation. And when you spoke about solitude, I guess we can all relate to that feeling of aloneness. And yet he found solitude to be something really precious, and he encouraged solitude. You know, he had this famous book, Letters to a Young Poet, where he shared with him that's, you know, to seek solitude, that solitude is actually the place where you could meet God and you could meet yourself. So in those moments that we're really lonely, maybe there's a way to find the depth of wisdom. You know, in isolation, there's a lot of gifts. And he spoke about his poetry being like an inner dictation, which is automatic writing. He would just be inspired and infused with these beautiful words, and poetry flowed out of him. And he had like these 25 days, I think, that he was in nature somewhere, that he wrote most of the Book of Hours, the famous collection of his poems. Like 67 poems came out of him. You know, it's like inspired mystics have the direct experience of God, and he was able to transmute it onto paper. And that's why I feel it touches us so much, because he spoke directly from that space. And other poetry is more commentary about what's going on in that time, poverty and World War I and all the things that were happening. But those moments of solitude was the kind of wisdom that we can relate to
when someone
in today.
Creates from that place, it's timeless.
Mm-hmm.
That reaches us, as if, you know, he felt to me almost like a good friend having a conversation with me when I would read, especially that book, Letters to a Young Poet. And then there's another book called The Wisdom of Rilke that I love that book also. They break everything down by theme, and it's a beautiful book.
And some of his poetry, there's a lot of beautiful love poetry where you can really sense his connection to Lou. And they have so many love letters. There was a deep connection and friendship. First, there was a sexual connection, but then it was this love that lingered. But my sense about Rilke was that, you know, he's not the one who ended the affair. He continued to suffer this unrequited love that was never replaced with another level that she was for him. She was mentor. She helped him with his writing. And there was so much loving exchange in their letters. And in his poetry, you could see that he still held her as the muse of love for him, or there was someone still in his heart calling forth the beautiful poetry, love poetry that came out of him.
Yeah.
Can I read one that I think is beautiful about love?
Sure.
How can I keep my soul in me so that it doesn't touch your soul? How can I raise it high enough past you to other things? I would like to shelter it among remote, lost objects in some dark and silent place that doesn't resonate when your depths resound. Yet everything that touches us, me and you, takes us together like a violin's bow, which draws one voice out of two separate strings. Upon what instrument are we to spand? And what musician holds us in his hand? Oh, sweet song. Just like the beauty of two souls united in love or love making, and he's introducing a third, you know, that the divinity or God as being the one that is playing the music on the two instruments and the two strings. I saw that as really beautiful, the sacred triad.
Yeah, and it seems that also there's a hint of him being able to experience that love even in separation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea of when you have that kind of love, nothing is ever lost. And we can meet those moments again and again.
Like he was able to carry the love for Lou in his heart and continue to use her as a muse of creation and continue to create. Like love was still very much alive in all of the poetry, even though she wasn't physically in his life. He knew it wasn't about the physical. And there is another poem where he says that two lovers are guardians of each other's solitude.
Yeah.
You know, and I thought that was so beautiful, that we have to recognize that even if there's a couple of lovers, it's not about losing oneself, but preserving the beauty of solitude, the one sacred space inside us that belongs only to God or only to our soul and our divinity, and to respect that. not to consume. And I think that Lou is the one that taught him about that.
You know, and that he also said with that, the idea was when you allow someone else to be, it's not emerging, but like to stand a guardian to everything, to the beauty of that person, and then they can emerge fully.
Mm-hmm.
They can shine fully for who they are. And he found that that was it was important in relationships, not to lose yourself, but to be truly who you are and to honor that in a relationship. And because a lot of people go into relationships and they feel that there has to be this kind of integration, and then something is lost. So he had a lot of wisdom.
Do you have something that you'd like to read about, a poem that you wanted to share?
Yes. Okay, so this is from Letters to a Young Poet. I do believe you need not be left without answers. If you will cling to things resembling those that are now rejuvenating me, if you will stay close to nature, to its simplicity, to the small things hardly noticeable, those things can unexpectedly become great and immeasurable. If you will love what seems to be insignificant and will, in an unassuming manner, as a servant, seek to win the confidence of what seems poor, then everything will become easier, more harmonious, and somehow more conciliatory, not for your intellect that will most likely remain behind astonished, but for your innermost consciousness, your awakenedness, and your inner knowing. You are so young. You stand before beginnings. I would like to beg of you, dear friend, as well as I can, to have patience with everything that remains unresolved in your heart, to try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books written in a foreign language. Do not now look for the answers. They cannot now be given to you because you cannot live them. It's a question of experiencing everything. At present, you need to live the questions. Perhaps you will gradually, without even noticing it, find yourself experiencing the answer some distant day.
What spoke to you from this particular letter?
The wisdom of what he's saying, that many times we have like a certain impatience about where we find ourselves in life, that we want to have answers that we're not ready to understand, is almost as if we need to give lifetime experiences time to integrate, to learn the lessons given, and through the growth in being that we can actually live our way into the answers that we have. So it's kind of like a way of coaching someone through maybe desperation or difficult moments where he's saying, stay there, allow it. There's something about, it's uncomfortable to be there, but something is being forged, something is changing or transmuting in you, and just know that you will come to the answers eventually, and to have patience with that. And I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. If I'm having a difficult moment and I read that, then I know that I could maybe sit back and allow the emotions, allow the if in that moment I'm suffering in some way, realizing that there's a timing to things, to have patience.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, like he speaks about solitude, we can also use the word meditative state. he would go to nature and spend time alone and appreciate long walks and really look within. He honored the inner knowing and the wisdom within himself, even during the hardest moments where he didn't have any patrons supporting him financially, or he had writer's block. And he knew that the answers weren't outside of him, that he would eventually find the answers within himself. He's directing that young poet to the same, I guess, advice that he found for himself, is that everything is inside us. And it's through stillness, through conscious isolation, inner kind of reflecting, that the answers are all there. And we keep looking outside when we're the only ones who have the answer to anything that's going on. That inner direction that came to him through his writing was incredible. There's so much wisdom that came forth. Maybe he sat and contemplated on an answer, you know. I want to read something that I found, that I feel he understood presence. He really understood entering the moment and becoming aware, you know, of everything in his environment. And in this poem, I feel like he's describing what presence is. So it's almost like the entry point into ourselves. He says, "The hour is striking so close above me, so clear and sharp, that all my senses ring with it. I feel it now. There's a power in me to grasp and give shape to my world. I know that nothing has ever been real without my beholding it. All becoming has needed me. My looking ripens things, and they come towards me to meet and be met." It's like, it's so powerful. It's almost like, without my beholding of my reality, it doesn't exist. It's about all of it, right? Whether it's happening outside or inside me, the present state, the oneness, the I amness is right here, described by him. That everything my looking ripens, and they come towards me to meet and be met. This is so beautiful. It's in this book, Rilke's Book of Hours.
Wow, beautiful.
It's really incredible to invite. It's almost like to invite the presence of Rilke to remind us there's so many beautiful teachings that these great poets left behind, and the resonance of that, the power of those words. So few words and such resonance.
Yeah.
You know? Can I read one more? Or do you have something?
Oh, I would love to hear from, I love that book, the one that you have.
This one, there's two that I'm sure you've heard. These two are probably his most famous ones. And this is more where he really contemplates God. And I think these two that are most well known are about his search for God within himself. "I believe in all that has never yet been spoken. I want to free what waits within me, so that what no one has dared to wish for may for once spring clear without my contriving. If this is arrogant, God, forgive me, but this is what I need to say. May what I do flow from me like a river, no forcing and no holding back, the way it is with children. Then in these swelling and ebbing currents, these deepening tides moving out, returning, I will sing you as no one ever has, streaming through widening channels into the open sea." And there's something about here freeing the soul. I mean, I'm feeling this, his desire to connect to that flow, the inner flow of existence inside him. And almost like asking God for permission for that freedom. And I don't know, just, it's such a beautiful imagery of outpouring and without forcing or holding back. And I'm thinking how in life, how often when you think about if the soul has this free flow, that there's a current, if we were just tuned in and would follow, the holding back and the forcing is our kind of ego's desire to control things. I want this way, you know, force or holding back. I'm afraid, I'm withholding. But if he's kind of asking for the freedom of his soul is to allow for him to flow through life, to follow the currents. And almost saying, like, is it arrogant, God, for me to desire the complete freedom of my soul?
It sounds also very vulnerable. Like there's a vulnerability to,
Yeah.
you know, when I hear that, I think of Lou, and how he had to learn to love her and let go of her.
Yeah.
Not controlling. And you have to have a lot of courage to love like that. There's so much vulnerability, and so I feel that when there wasn't that at the end there wasn't that union, the only way that he could use that love state is to allow it to be free, to be open and vulnerable, and allow the freedom of those emotions to flow within him, and for her to have her life the way she wanted to have her life. Because in those situations where we have unrequited love, we could end up turning that into, we could, in a way, destroy the state, right? We could go into other emotions. It could be other emotions of resentment. And then all of a sudden you have the elixir of this beautiful love state, that if you could have that courage, you know, without my contriving, with the being able to flow with what's and ride those waves, and use it as, I mean, you know, she was his muse, the love he had for her. So I see it like that also, in the
like
way
freeing of the love state, freeing of it without the constraints of a relationship, without the constraints of heartbreak, longing, or desire for we must be together, which they couldn't be together.
Right. Without demanding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how that's difficult. Like we're, you know, when we think about our relationship, sometimes it's hard to feel safe in that. It's really hard. We want to possess, you know, it's kind of like putting the unicorn in a fence, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know, or the bird in a cage. And what ends up happening is, then I think two people lose themselves. Mm-hmm. But it's really difficult to be vulnerable like that and flow with life and allow that freedom. So I think he was not only asking permission, but he was also hoping he could do that, like that he had the capacity to live life like that. Do not allow yourself to be confused in your aloneness by something within you that wishes to be released from it. This very wish, if you will calmly and deliberately use it as a tool, will help to expand your solitude into far distant realms. People have, with the help of so many conventions, resolved everything the easy way, on the easy side of easy. But it is clear that we must embrace struggle. Every living thing conforms to it. Everything in nature grows and struggles in its own way, establishing its own identity, insisting on it at all cost, against all resistance. We can be sure of very little, but the need to court struggle is a surety that will not leave us. It is good to be lonely, for being alone is not easy. The fact that something is difficult must be one more reason to do it. To love is also good, for love is difficult. For one human being to love another is perhaps the most difficult task of all, the epitome, the ultimate test. It is that striving for which all other striving is merely preparation.
Such great wisdom. To embrace struggle, to embrace challenge. How often we just look to escape and to avoid, where he's saying that struggle is actually what forms us, what, you know, chisels us into our being. To embrace loneliness, to embrace depression. And we know he suffered depression, and seeing love as a struggle clearly he had unrequited love and longing. And he saw that as something that was to be sought after. So much learning there.
It was the struggle that he had with losing his beloved, in a sense, that taught him how to really love. Taught him another kind of love, another divine love.
Yeah.
So he saw that in the struggle there was something that could emerge that was even, and like you said, it's the preparation. All the struggles are a preparation for us to, if we have that possibility of meeting that love, to be able to actually truly love someone.
Mm-hmm. There's another part, I think it was in the same letter, maybe not, but about the same thing, you know, about the dragons.
Yes.
Dragons and princesses. It's just 2 lines. Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is in its deepest essence something helpless that wants our love. And I love this because this is about the challenges, the internal challenges. You know, I think of dragons as our own demons, and how if we perceive something that may be ugly and frightening or challenging as something that's beautiful and helpless and just waiting for us to step up into courage and to love them, love that part of ourselves. Because it's almost like he was loving his own struggles with loneliness, his own struggles with longing, with poverty, with struggle, with just everything that was going on politically around him. He had difficulty with all of it. And yet he can transform it into something positive, something helpless that wants our love. He writes a lot of poetry about loving, kind of loving the inner child, loving the soldier and the king. You know, it's like the soul loving the body.
It's also, you know, sometimes there's parts of us that we don't like. There's parts of us that give us an incredible amount of friction, and to be able to love those parts, to be able to love those parts. And when I hear that, I always think of a way that you can see other people, because sometimes we are confronted with people that could be like dragons, right? Or they can have a certain personality and they can bring you a lot of friction. But if you really look carefully, there is really someone there that just wants to be loved, that wants to be understood. So it's not just about the parts of ourselves that is difficult or the difficulties we have, but it's also for those we encounter in life, to be able to see it like that. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah. And very loving, very compassionate. Everyone has dragons in their lives.
Yeah.
I just love it to see anyone that you think is like, you go into judgment, to see that them as a helpless little princess waiting to be saved with love. It's just such a beautiful image. He's using, you know, myth and symbolism to represent something we encounter every day. See those dragons and love them. It's just really powerful.
You know, reminds me of the story of Beauty and the Beast, right?
Yeah.
Where it really is true. When you have someone in front of you that is like hardened and there's an exterior, but if you could just have that patience to enter a different way, to reach them in a different way, you can melt it like in an instant. Because love is like that. It melts you instantly.
You know what's interesting also in mythology, dragons are usually guardians, right? They're fierce, but they're protectors. So they're guarding the castle where the princess is. So to me, it's almost like our dragons are our protectors, our defenses against the vulnerability of what's inside us, which is our inner world, our soul, that beautiful innocence that resides inside us. and it resides in everyone else. So when someone's dragon comes out, if we know that dragon is just guarding that treasure inside and patiently, maybe there's a way through love and tenderness to get the dragon to step back, and the princess emerges.
And reveal the prince or princess, right? I love that analogy. That's beautiful.
And it works in life, because I know when I remember to do it and use love and compassion and patience with myself or someone in front of me in the time of anger or the time of angst, frustration, stress, it does work.
It does.
Projecting it.
Yeah.
What are we all seeking? What is Rilke seeking?
Love.
Can I read one more? My favorite.
Okay.
That's your favorite. I don't know if you have something, but it's my favorite.
No, I'm good. Like mine are long, so I think I'd much rather hear you read yours.
This is my favorite.
Okay.
It's about solitude, but it's about also a treasure. Love your solitude and try to sing out with the pain it causes you. For those who are near you are far away, and this shows that the space around you is beginning to grow vast. Be happy about your growth, in which, of course, you can't take anyone with you, and be gentle with those who stay behind. Be confident and calm in front of them, and don't torment them with your doubts, and don't frighten them with your faith and joy, which they wouldn't be able to comprehend. Seek out some simple and true feeling of what you have in common with them, which doesn't necessarily have to alter when you yourself change over and over again. When you see them, love life in a form that is not your own, and be indulgent towards those who are growing old, who are afraid of the aloneness that you trust. And don't expect any understanding, but believe in a love that is being stored up for you like an inheritance, and have faith that in this love, there's a strength and a blessing so large that you can travel as far as you wish without having to step outside it. It's a wow.
That's a wow.
What?
That's so piercing.
I mean,
wow.
This is a spiritual it's a journey that if anyone has ever experienced feeling that ugly duckling symptom, growing up and feeling different, usually it's seekers, right? Seeking meaning in life. And he's kind of saying, you know what, when you're growing, you're going to feel alone. When you're expanding, when you're curious, and still meet people where they're at. Yes, you're going to feel alone, but have this kind of patience with other people. And when you start to trust the solitude and the aloneness, that it's actually your own inner world that's connecting to something, there's this incredible treasure. I call it treasure. He says inheritance inside you, which he calls love. And you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to step outside of it. It's right there, just waiting for you to discover. So again, through solitude and aloneness, through the inner journey, find that treasure.
To me, it also speaks of, sometimes you have the people closest to you that sometimes you start to realize that you're not, you can't take them where you're going. You can't even explain to them the states that you're having or the realizations, and you want to.
Yeah.
You want to embrace them and take them with you, but then you can't. And like he says, don't even torture them, because in many ways, if someone's not a seeker, you can't make them a seeker. Yes. So it's like loving them and finding that which you have in common. Something is there that you can still love, and realize that to continue to strive and change, because that's what we do as seekers. We continue to evolve and grow and have realizations, and it's beautiful to trust that. That becomes what you trust most as you get older and you're evolving. You feel safe in that.
But we're not getting older.
No. No. No.
There was a time that men wrote poetry to women.
I
He
know.
had so many women because he wrote from his heart poetry.
Yeah. There's still some men out there that write
Yes,
poetry.
we know some of them. Yes, they do.
Yes, we do.
We do.
It's a blessing, right?
Yeah,
To
writing from
be
the heart. It is.
anyone, but it's beautiful to see it from a man.
Mhm. Definitely.
They have the courage to write from that place.
The courage to love.
Courage to love.
With this, I sign off and send you my deepest love.
Okay. Love you, my love.